President Biden has unveiled sweeping new action to offer legal protections to roughly 500,000 undocumented migrants nationwide.
The steps I'm taking today are overwhelmingly supported by the American people, no matter what the other team says. In fact, polls show over 70% of Americans support this effort to keep families together.
The new plan is the largest expansion of immigration policy since DACA, also known as Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, during the Obama years. It's going to prevent some undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens, along with their children, from facing deportation. And it makes it easier for them to apply for work visas and lawful permanent residency. Camilo Montoya-Galvez and Weijia Jiang join us now to discuss it. Camilo is a CBS News immigration and politics reporter. Weijia is CBS News senior White House correspondent. Welcome to you both. Camilo, you are the expert, so explain to us when this program goes into effect and how it's going to work.
Hi, Nancy. As you underscored, this will be the biggest immigration program for undocumented immigrants in the U.S. since the DACA policy for Dreamers that just turned 12 years old this past weekend. Now, undocumented spouses of American citizens will be able to apply for work permits and deportation protections if they have lived here in the U.S. for at least 10 years. But perhaps more importantly, Nancy, these eligible immigrants will also get a more streamlined path and process for seeking U.S. citizenship and also permanent residency. An immigrant right now, Nancy, is eligible for a green card if he or she marries a U.S. citizen. But many of these immigrants who have been here illegally in the country have to first go back to their home country and re-enter the U.S. legally to get that green card. But that process can actually trigger a 10-year ban from the U.S. This new policy will prevent that from happening by allowing these immigrants to adjust their status here in the U.S. to green card status, and after 5 years, U.S. citizenship. So it is a massive policy change by the Biden administration. And officials tell us that it is expected to open up to new applications by the end of the summer.
Yeah, a lot of these undocumented immigrants are dreamers. They came to this country as children and don't even really have any memories of their home country. Weijia, the president himself acknowledged today, though, that some progressives were angry about the asylum crackdown that he announced a couple weeks ago. So is that why he followed it up so quickly with this plan that they're going to like a lot more?
Well, the White House says, Nancy, that no, that is not the reason, that this is not meant to offset that other policy, as you mentioned, which really restricts the way that people can request asylum at ports of entry. But to your point, the president himself said that both things can be true. We can secure the border while also being American. And that is exactly what his message focused on today, that, you know, he felt his hands were tied and he blamed Congress, especially Senate Republicans, for not moving forward on a way to control the flow of migrants at the border. At the same time, he said he wanted to find a way to keep families together, and that is why he rolled out today's policy. But there were progressives here, lawmakers, there were immigration advocates who were really praising the president's decision today. And, of course, they were the exact same people who were criticizing him just 2 weeks ago for that other action. So even though the White House says that this was not in direct response to that, certainly you can draw that line, especially since the president himself did.
No question. Camilo, you know, generally when an administration tries to establish a sweeping new immigration plan without Congress, it eventually gets struck down by the courts. And I'm talking about Democratic presidencies, Republican presidencies. Is that a likelihood in this case?
Very much so, Nancy. Republican-led states are almost certainly going to challenge this executive action by President Biden in the federal court system. We know that virtually every major immigration action by the president over the past 3 years has been challenged by Republican-led states, including his more generous immigration policies. And we should expect another lawsuit from Texas and other Republican-led states who, by the way, back during the Obama administration, were able to strike down a policy that would have given work permits to the undocumented parents of U.S. citizens and green card holders. So this policy is likely to face legal challenges. The Biden administration is preparing for those challenges, but it will argue that it has the legal authority to do this and that the president has taken action, Nancy, because Congress, as you know, has not passed a major significant update to the immigration system, since the 1990s.
Yes, every effort has failed spectacularly in Congress. The Trump campaign put out a statement, pretty blistering. They said, quote, Biden has created another invitation for illegal immigration through his mass amnesty order. What do polls tell us about what voters actually want to see? Do they support making it easier for undocumented immigrants to gain citizenship?
So when you take a step back and look more broadly, Nancy, for that group of voters that considers immigration to be a major factor in their vote, a recent CBS News poll shows that Trump is actually beating Biden there. 75% of those people, compared to 23%, say that they would support Trump. But then when you look at a recent poll by the Pew Research Center that just came out in April that specifically addressed the president's actions today about whether undocumented immigrants currently living in the U.S. should be able to stay legally, 59% of voters say yes. So it seems that they are in favor of what the president announced today.
That is really interesting. Camilo, the asylum program was announced by the president a couple of weeks ago, turning asylum seekers back anytime migrant encounters reach a certain threshold at the southern border. What's the status of that program? Has this had any effect on the flow of migrants across the border, or is it just too soon to say?
Nancy, there has been a dramatic drop in illegal crossings along the U.S.-Mexico border since President Biden enacted this crackdown on asylum there. A U.S. official tells CBS News that just on Monday, yesterday, Border Patrol apprehended roughly 2,000 migrants. That is the lowest level of illegal crossings since 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic severely depressed migration to the U.S. So officials would point to that as evidence that it is having an impact in deterring some people from crossing into the U.S. illegally. It is still, I think, Nancy, too early to make any definitive conclusions. But again, the administration would say that it is having an impact and that time will tell whether or not eventually this will lead to a permanent drop in illegal migration.
And of course, progressives complain that this is a major rollback of asylum protections that have been in place for decades.
That's right.
I want to switch gears and ask you about something that just happened this afternoon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a statement accusing the U.S. of continuing to withhold weapons from Israel. This was news to most. How is the White House responding?
It was news to the White House, apparently, Nancy, because Karine Jean-Pierre said, quote, we genuinely do not know what he's talking about. We just don't. She went on to say that there was one shipment of high payload munitions that was on pause in early May, and that the U.S. continues to have conversations with Israel about that particular shipment. And it was paused out of concern for the Israeli offensive into Rafah and a lot of unknowns about how they would carry out their military operation there. But Jean-Pierre says that that was the only and is the only shipment in question, and that there have not been any others. And so she's saying that she doesn't know what Netanyahu was talking about. But, Nancy, it's interesting that he not only issued a statement, he did so in a video. So he was speaking English. This was clearly for a Western audience, and it comes just days after he disbanded his war cabinet.
Right.
And so there are many questions about how that could impact his decision-making, his statements, and strategy moving forward.
Yeah, there's been so much tumult in his cabinet. It makes you wonder if he's looking to put up a straw man somewhere else to distract some domestic attention. Camilo, Montoya-Galvez, and Weijia Jiang, thank you both so much for your insights.